ですが。
わがままじゃありません。
これでいい。俺のセカンドライフはここから始めるんだ。
So, chilling in my 30s after getting fired from the Demon King's army. So, first and foremost, like, I think the nature of this I kind of really dig because, being an old man in his 30s himself, I initially, really vibed with just the nature of, like, this older dude, even though, like, 30 isn't old whatsoever, but, like, just the nature of, like, this way older than 18 or 20, being the protagonist or the main person of the story, I found really endearing. It's very similar to, I can't remember the exact name, but there was another isekai anime where basically two office workers were isekai to another world, and I was like, oh, that's interesting because they're older too, so I take more interest in that just because I'm closer to that than I am like the everyday high schooler being isekai somewhere, right? Like, that has been long gone. Like, that is, like, we're talking 20 years ago at this point, which is grossly sad, but that's just the nature of it. So I was really excited to jump into this anime, and by clicking on this video, you're asking the question, right? Like, should you watch it? And this specific anime is harder to answer than I think a lot of the other ones that I've reviewed here on the channel so far, this winter season. And the reason is because I genuinely like it, and I think it is serviceable and it's good. But at the same time, I don't think it's better than a lot of other anime, but at the same time, it's comparable to a lot of other ones. Now, I think, what this specific show offers to you as a viewer, right, is it offers to you initially a unique initial concept of this dude who was in his 30s, who was in the demon's army, and he was fired from it, and he's discovered by a human village, and he is now discovering abilities in this human. Like, the concept of it is pretty unique. But when it gets down to brass tacks and we get down to, like, what's this show actually going to be about, it's about the same thing as a lot of other anime that exist out there that you've watched already probably a dozen times, right? Essentially, this story is going to involve Dariel, who used to work for the demon army. And Dariel was, and I'm going to kind of describe it, and then you can decide if you want to watch it for yourself, and I'll make a recommendation at the end. But Dariel was adopted by the former Demon King. He was found by the Demon King, and his whole life he was brought up as a demon. Now, the distinction between demons and between humans is only one thing. Humans do not have magic. Demons have magic. Otherwise, there's no ogre-looking people. They're all people, but it's basically like one set are mages and one aren't. But the mages, instead of being mages or magicians or witches, they are instead called demons. That's the only distinction. Basically, one subset of the population has magic, one set doesn't, and they basically clash between each other. Now, the one thing we did find in the anime is humans are able to use aura. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's the distinction. So his whole life he was brought up as a demon that was just simply born magicless, and he has had a rough going of it because the Demon King's actual son has now taken the throne. Well, with the Demon King's son actually taking the throne, he's had a vendetta against this dude forever because his dad chose him and adopted him and made him part of the family, etc., etc. And he is now able to fulfill his vendetta because his father has now retired and passed on the throne to him. So he fires this dude. He just basically, he doesn't exile him, but he fires him. And Dario decides to exile himself because he's like, I've been part of the Demon King's army for 32 years. He's roughly in his 30s, right? He's probably discovered at the age of like 5, so he's probably in his mid to late 30s, or he could just be 32, I don't know. But, he tells us, the viewer, he's like, hey, I've been part of this demon army for 32, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself now. So he just begins, he just leaves and just begins walking. And he's eventually discovered by this girl. I didn't write down what her name is. I don't know what her name is, but big titty girl. He's he's found by Big Titty Girl, and he saves her from like this beast. He's pretty powerful, but he's very weak. And he uses a knife for the first time, which was weird. And I was like, how did he was the assistant to the 4 generals in the Demon King's army. It's like, well, how did he fight before with no magic? It's basically demons fight with magic. That's it. No weapons. So it's like, well, what did you use before? Regardless, I'm gonna let that one go. But he destroys this monster that was chasing this girl. She decides that, okay, I'm gonna, you saved me, thank you, blah blah blah. Against his behest, she literally drags his ass to her village to show thanks. And then because he doesn't have anywhere to go, she invites him to stay there. And he's like, okay, I will. Then we find out the dad of the girl is the head of the village, and he's also the head of the adventurer guild in that village. And they make him sign a adventurer's kind of like license thing. And apparently a lot of demons die when they're trying to infiltrate human villages and human towns and stuff from being incepted into the adventurers guild because demons get rejected. And at this point, Dario finds out that he's actually human. And it all kind of comes together now with him being discovered by the past Demon King. He's like, oh, I wonder if he knew that or not. But he now finds out that, okay, he's actually human. He was just part of the demon's army. He was brought up to be a demon. Then we find out, later on he gets tested in the episode, and we find out that humans, they can't wield magic, but they do have something called aura. And essentially there's 4 types of aura, which is slash, sting, hit, and block. They basically summon up they have an aura ability. And each of them basically gives them a defensive or offensive type of ability. And he can actually wield all 4. The dad is very surprised by it because no one's ever done it before. So obviously our main character is going to be OP in the human aspect of this. I think maybe only like the hero had ever had the ability to wield all 4 auras. And then he's incepted into the guild. He decides to stay there. The girl's all over his nuts, and he decides to stay there, and he begins taking on quests and stuff. So here's my recommendation. Should you watch it? I think, if your winter season is too filled up, I think the answer's no. If you watch episode 1 and you don't completely vibe with Daria as a character, I think the answer is no. And I think if you're not really a fan of these generic fantasy type anime, I think the answer is no. Now, where the answer becomes yes is, I think I don't think you watch this every week, but I think maybe you catch up every other Sunday or so. Maybe let a few Sundays pass, your busy weekends, whether you're out partying, working, chilling, playing a game, outside hiking a mountain, whatever it is. I think you let this go for a few weeks and then catch up maybe 3 or 4 episodes at a time, kind of like binge it, I do think it's good enough for that. I'm not going to watch this every week. I don't think this is going to be one that I review every single week. But I do think it is a good enough to watch. I think it's a good anime to watch. I think it's a good fantasy anime. It's one of those just turn your brain off and enjoy this silly OP character that they're going to give us here, or that he's going to eventually become, because he's probably going to become a staple in the human realm, and eventually he's going to have to coincide with the demon side. They're going to find out how powerful he was, and he was actually human, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of turmoil down the line. And then we also have Big Titty Girl, which is also going to be a fan service trope throughout the season, which I think is worth, watching. So I do think that there is something here. I don't think it's going to rock the socks of anybody. I think it's going to be a solid 7 out of 10 good fantasy anime for the season. But it's a story and a plot and a character device that we've seen over and over again. It's tried. It's true. It's going to be enjoyable. But I don't think that this is something you put over other anime this season, like Bofuri, like Nagatoro, like Spy Classroom, like My Hero Season 6, like a lot of different returning anime this season, Eminence and Shadow continuing anime. I don't think this is something you put over that in your priority list, but I do think if you have extra time on a Sunday, watch it. And I do think if you have extra time just in general, let it sit for a few weeks and then come back, and I think it's good enough to just, turn your brain off and watch. All right, those have been my thoughts on should you watch Chillin' in My 30s after getting fired from the Demon King's army. I will see you on another video this season for another anime. Peace, my friends.